Hello and welcome to Glasgow Doors Open Day's Digital Festival. This event will begin soon, but first we have a brief housekeeping message. So that you can get the most out of this session, we'd like to point out a few features of Zoom. By clicking on the buttons at the bottom of the Zoom window, you will be able to access the chat room, and if you are in a webinar, you will also be able to make use of the Q&A function. The Q&A function is so that you can ask specific questions of the speaker, which they will be able to answer time allowing at the end of the session. Use the chat room to contribute more generally to the discussion or to share links and resources. When using these features, please mind your P's and Q's. Both will be monitored and recorded. Most sessions will be recorded and uploaded to Glasgow Doors Open Days Festival YouTube channel and website. If you're in a meeting, please make sure you keep your microphone on mute unless otherwise directed by the host. If for some reason the session ends unexpectedly or you lose connection, please just click the link again and wait to be let back in. Similarly, if the host loses connection, please bear with us. We will do our best to manage any connection issues as and when they occur, and may contact you by email if necessary. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'd love to hear about your experience of our digital festival. Fill out our survey to be in with a chance of winning a prize. Our survey is available at www.glasgowdoorsopendays.org.uk/survey. We hope you enjoy this event.
All right, good evening everyone. Welcome to the last of the GIA's 3 Behind the Prize events, which we're holding in conjunction with Glasgow Doors Open Day. My name is Phil Zushper, I'm President of the Glasgow Institute of Architects, and just wanted to take a quick moment just to thank you all for making it to come along tonight, especially when the weather's so lovely outside tonight, so thanks a lot for coming. For those of you that don't know, the GIA is a chapter of the Royal Incorporation of Architects in Scotland. And each year we hold the GIA Student Awards, which recognise the work of the very best architecture students across both of Glasgow's 2 schools of architecture, the Macintosh School of Architecture and University of Strathclyde. The awards are assessed by the GIA Council, and as you can imagine, the standards are very, very high. And in the past, we've generally just held an awards ceremony, and in recent years, we've created this forum, which is called Behind the Prize, as a bit of a platform to try and bring together the universities so that we can discuss architecture and education and the built environment, but also just as a chance to sort of celebrate the fantastic work of the students, and especially this year, under the difficult circumstances that the students have had to finish the academic year. It's tremendous, the quality of work that's been produced and the effort that everybody's went to again. On that note, by extension, we want to use the opportunity to thank and congratulate the staff of the universities for their efforts in this respect and for pulling off the very first all-digital degree shows for both schools of architecture in their history. So a big well done to them as well. On that note, this is the first time that we're doing these events digitally as well. So whilst I don't need to mention any fire drills and health and safety guidance this time around, I do apologise for any technical hiccups in advance. We've had a relatively plain sailing past 2 events, so hopefully we can keep a clean sheet for all 3. So thanks. So I'll hand over now to my colleague Massimo, who's been the brains behind organising these events, and he'll explain a little bit more about the format of the evening and introduce our speakers for the evening. Thanks.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 3rd and final night of Behind the Prize. Yeah, really happy to still be able to put this event on despite the circumstances. But yeah, really happy to be here. So been through this a couple of times, but I'll explain what's coming up tonight. The theme of tonight is surroundings, which, as you'll see, applies in a few different ways to the different speakers' projects. The way we'll run the night is having the student present the project, Then we'll have a couple of questions when they're done. So please don't hesitate to submit your questions in the chat boxes and the little Q&A box below, and I'll read them out after to the speaker. The event is really centred on helping out youth students, and creating this discussion on the winners projects is a real plus of having a night and an event on like this. So please ask away. So here we go. First, we'll have a great project by Strathclyde fourth year student Eugenia Cackley. Her design shows how our surroundings, when designed right, can help care for those vulnerable in our community. So yeah, Eugenia, if you want to start sharing your screen, and that'll get us going.
Yes. Hello everyone, my name is Eugenia, and I'll be presenting my fourth year project. The brief given structure around the forming of an ambitious yet possible city strategy for our city Glasgow that responds to the demand for its rejuvenation and the consolidation of the health of its citizens. It was asked to design 4 buildings, a greenhouse, a council house, a coffee house, and a bathhouse. And it was up to us, the students, to suggest a city strategy where these buildings link and stand divided, and how they encourage our city to unite over ever-growing issues that we face daily. And one of those issues that is slowly becoming Glasgow's legacy is the extent of homelessness. The mile route, which we can see here, is where many people sleep rough every night, is called Mile of Misery, and consists of Argyle, Buchanan, and Salterford Street, one of Glasgow's most upmarket shopping areas. The proposed city strategy assigns a unique role to each of those buildings, aiming to raise awareness for the issue at hand and relieve it. The sites are located in an understood axis that cuts through that mile of misery, and one of Glasgow's primary civic areas, thus, breaking the cycles of misery from within the heart of the city. Firstly, we have the greenhouse here located in George Square. This project is aimed to raise public awareness, and it relates to the reimagining of George Square, which remains the city's focal point for gathering and ceremonies. Here, George Square is envisioned as a place to see and be seen, where a public garden space is underneath the square, and abstract concrete slabs are placed on the sloping stretch of land, introducing artifacts and historical information on the history of deprivation in Glasgow. The next project here, called Ecclesia, meaning church in modern Greek, represents a modern-day temple where people can gather and meet and realize the power they have through debate and confrontation of ideas. For this scheme, for this phase of the scheme, the city strategy proposes the placement of a tower inside the courtyard of city chambers in an attempt to reinvent one of Glasgow's long spaces and challenge the government body into action on the homelessness issue. It connects underground with a greenhouse via an amphitheatre that is used for monthly public gatherings and discussions of the progress of the council. And at such, we are arriving to the latest project called St. Mary Shelters, which takes up an equally disused courtyard west of George Square. This is a shelter that offers temporary accommodation, as well as rehabilitative support, sanitary care, and a public bathhouse. And this design was led by the core philosophy of primitive communal needs of sharing a bath and meals together as the starting point of the guest's rehabilitation journey. And while action on homelessness is the thematic glue of the project, it was imperative to come up with a set of design principles that answer to all. And these included the use of courtyards and underground space and tall towers. Now, courtyards are really easy to miss, but because they're particularly well suited to public gatherings, it was aimed to translate these little spaces into a wonder itself that also mark the entrance to an underground weave of communal activities. And at the other end of the spectrum of the social behavior of the project stands a more extroverted response with the use of tall landmark towers, opening up new vistas, and thus creating unmistakable beacons of progress that attract its vulnerable citizens to seek help. Now, the St. Mary's shelters is, in particular, will combine dorms for the homeless people housed in the tall tower and a public bathhouse just underground, making the building a key hub in the community, aiding interaction. And after all, we're all the same when we are bathing, wearing almost nothing. And just below the tower, there is the cinema square here, an amphitheatrical stage that provides the main component of the public square within the master plan, leading to the lower levels. And it is intended for program uses such as public gathering, music events, outdoor cinema. The section is organized in 3 main parts. There is the tower with the dorms at upper levels, while public amenities such as studios, contemplation spaces, and staff offices are at its lower levels. Then we have the public realm at ground level, which seeks to create a basis, a series of routes and spaces that establish environment for activity and movement. And then finally, we have the actual background at underground level. It was critical that the St. Mary's courtyard will not remain a dead space. Therefore, it was important that the public is engaged with areas where space can be activated, but small-scale, kiosks such as the amphitheater that I have mentioned before, that will be animated with visual stimulus to aid development of the area, or the gallery space here that it provides a softer landscape perimeter with planting and space for social seating and public artworks. Then another thing is that we have what I like to call the antipodes. The antipodes are light wells, basically diametrically oppose each other to dramatically admit light into the lower levels, while also providing space for planting. And the aim was for St. Mary's Courtyard, as you can see here, to turn from a negative space to a positive, that is now an informal setting for gathering for those living in the tower or those just visiting or passing through the courtyard. But the needs of homeless people exceed those of just bathing. It was also crucial to create an easily accessible yet robust environment that responds to everyday necessities of people that have suffered. A 24/7 open route here that is directly accessible from the dorms, provide essential amenities such as hair care, sanitary care, a laundrette, including space for clothes hire and self-repair, pet grooming, and a pharmacy and infirmary. The scheme also proposes the use of the existing adjacent buildings floor for meal preparation and dining. Here we see views from the reception area, or as you were walking through this accessible route and overlooking down to the bathhouse. And at last we have the laundrette. At lower level, there is the actual bathhouse that is purposefully stripped from excessive programming, and the interior is generally free-flowing to accommodate social interaction between bathers. Dramatically illuminated, but the antipodes above the smaller pools are clad in muted green and terracotta toned glazed tiles, echoing interiors that evoke sensitivity and warmth. In contrast, concrete walls are selected for the main pool area, giving the lead to the amphitheater, to the interrupted steps of the amphitheater above to shed imposing light into the interior. The edges of void spaces will be softened with ivy plants or creepers by designing planter boxes on the roof to allow plants to appear below the skylight. And here are some typical floor plans from the tower itself, with a typical floor plan of a dorm offering 5 beds, a small kitchen, dining space, and a living room area, which overlooks which offers views to city chambers here, and the Ecclesia project across. And the towers basically that make up the focal points of this project, while facing each other, they still work in unison to attract troubled people to seek help. They're supposed to be, these towers, they're supposed to be abstract from afar, but intimate upon closer inspection. And while they mirror each other, they create this axis of care that invites people there to sleep, to eat, to bathe, to converse with the council and the public, and to simply belong. That was my project. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was great, Eugenia. I really enjoyed that. I'll open the floor up for the Q&A. If anyone wants to submit a question to that, that'd be really good. We're in a bit of a rush to fit in everyone tonight, since we've got 4 people, but I'll kick ourselves off with a couple of questions. I really liked your kind of reframing of the city chambers as a place that's actually meant to be really help people. Because it was kind of built with this way to show off wealth, and it's quite an intimidating building sometimes if you look at it. So I think reframing it and looking at using it as a place to solve a really prevalent problem in the city is quite nice, just to kind of open it up. I thought that was great. Yeah.
That was the purpose, to pressure, if you like, the council to act on the issue, while by placing this huge building, that means that the council actually is willing to help and generate this positive attitude from within the heart of the city was crucial to me.
Totally, yeah. But I was wondering, I don't know if you could go maybe back to a section just to show all 3 interventions. So
I
was wondering,
share my screen again.
Yeah, if you share screen.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, go for it. So I love the kind of interventions you did with George Square as well, making it much more habitable space. But the other tower that kind of opposes the council one. So apart from creating that kind of axis, was there a reason you picked that block specifically? Is there existing St. Mary's facilities there or something, or?
I think the main reasoning for choosing these specific sites was because these are the most prevalent, the primary civic areas that you can find in Glasgow still to this day, and housing a very important government body, city chambers. So it was almost a symbolic move to place these very imposing towers within this courtyard specifically, to trigger, to pressure council housing to action. And the fact that these towers are so tall, this is not just a random thinking. It's specific. They are purposefully that tall to attract people, vulnerable people, because I don't think they know where to turn to. I mean, there are some services and networks that help homeless people, but these people, you have to remember that most people may not have internet access, or it's simply they're just so wear off from everyday life that just don't care anymore to look for. So these act like beacons, attracting their attention.
Totally, yeah. Well, I think that's a really great project to start us off tonight. Really enjoyed that presentation.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll just move on to the next next presenter. We have Strathclyde Year 1 student Ailey. If you mind sharing your screen, please.
Hello everyone, so I'm Ailey and I'm Strathclyde Uni, and I'm going to be showing you my most recent project from first year. We were asked to design a small space for a local artist with an exhibition space. As part of this design brief, our design had to slot into a tenement gap site somewhere within Glasgow. So for our project brief, I was given James Wrigler, who's a very talented ceramicist. I was also given the opportunity to meet James and have a tour of his workspace. From this, I got a greater understanding of his needs and wants for a studio and gallery space, which included open plan spaces with both the natural and artificial lighting, and also flexible spaces for workshop and exhibition spaces. So looking at this location plan, you can see the block we were allocated was in Partick, Glasgow, and on a smaller scale, the gap site that I chose was 200 Dumbarton Road. To understand the proportions of the tenement facade in greater detail, we completed a 1:50 artwork of a section of the facade in the style of Minty Sainsbury. For this, I used fine line pen using pointillism as I thought it conveyed the texture of the sandstone the most effective. And then moving on to a bit of site analysis, the surrounding buildings were mostly public buildings, housing shops, takeaways and smaller businesses. And in addition to this, a lot of the residential areas were from students who commuted to Glasgow Uni. As a result of this, the main road past the site is generally quite busy. This created a lot of noise, movement, along with both pedestrian and road traffic. When looking for some inspiration for my project, I chose the Duke of York restaurant, designed by Next Studios. I chose this because it was quite a similar scale to the one in our brief, and it was of a circular form, which I thought was quite similar to James's work as it was cornerless and smooth, which was something I wanted to experiment with when I was designing my project. When looking at this design in further detail, I noticed that the services of this building were retained to the core of the building, while the public were served in the surrounding skirt at the edge. Moving on to some development, I chose to work in air drying clay as it's a very similar medium to what James would use in his studio. Here is experimenting with the curvature and the placement of the circulation tower within the building. By doing this, I learned how James would work on a very basic level and his need for quick access to tools and facilities as it got quite messy quite quickly. For my final facade, I used a combination of arched and rectangular windows which foreshadow the interior of the building. This conveys James's work with the smooth and flowing edges of the window, which harmonise with the sharper angles, which link to the exposed terracotta and concrete within the interior. When looking at the floor plan in sight, I chose to put the curving tower of circulation at the rear of the building, as this hints towards the historical style of tenements in Glasgow, where the circulation and stairwells would normally be extruded out the back into private courtyards or closes. When looking at the plan in further detail, I used a lot of curved shapes within the building which were reminiscent of James's cornerless style, which he adopts within his ceramic work. I think this worked quite well in areas of the building, such as the cafe and the stairwell, but it wasn't as consistent as I wanted throughout the building due to the need for practical space. And here you can see the exposed terracotta and materials within the cafe area of the building. And this is the second floor of the building, which is the exhibition space. This is large and open plan, which is what James wanted, which is suitable for varied events such as exhibitions and workshops. Large full height windows that you can see in the render here at the front of the building give dramatic lighting as they're south facing throughout the day. But in addition to this, there are windows at the rear of this room which give consistent north light throughout the day. Moving on to the third floor, this is James's studio with an additional public viewing area. The addition of the glass partition you can see just off the viewing area allows the public to have insight onto the production of the ceramics and how they're created. But James mentioned that he didn't want to feel like he was working within a goldfish bowl, so the addition of a screen between the two panes of glass was added for privacy. Moving on to the fourth floor, this obviously has James's kiln, staff base and office for his work, but also a potted plant and gallery garden shop at the top as well. This encourages people to move from the bottom all the way to the top of the building, making every level a public space. and it also gives the people an experience from the bottom to the top. I also thought this was quite effective as it gives a visual journey of how the ceramics are created, as at the bottom you can see how the final product looks, and then as you move up you can see how they're created, and at the very top you can also take one home. And so this is a little render, so you can see the doors to the right are onto the office and kiln and staff base. And then this is a section which allows you to see the double height ceiling space within the gallery and the roof lights at the top to allow for photosynthesis for the plants and etc. at the top as well. Thank you for listening, and that's my presentation.
It was brilliant, Ailey. Really enjoyed that presentation. Brings me back to my first year days at Strathclyde, doing that, taking on that brief. So what did you think was like maybe like the most challenging aspect of working for that live client? Because he's got quite a particular style. Was that hard to incorporate, or?
I thought it was really interesting. I'm quite a big fan of artwork and stuff like that anyway, so I found it very interesting learning his kind of little styles and things. And I thought it was quite interesting how you could make a building that was reminiscent of someone's artwork as well. Because you could kind of look at the building and you could get the same sort of image that his artwork would give in some ways. I think the hardest part was maybe because you're first year, you don't really know how to work with a client. So that was maybe like the hardest part, in making sure it was something that they wanted, but also something that you knew how to do.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
that was the hardest part for me, but I really enjoyed it regardless of the challenges it produced.
Yeah, can you share your screen again? I want to see that first, that kind of interior view. So I was wondering, was that this one of the artworks that you put into it? Was that the inspiration for the facade? Yeah. Just keep going.
This one?
It's on where you can see the. No, keep going. It was kind of the first one you showed. Yeah, that one there.
Yeah. So the little man was one of my favourites. So yeah, the arched head of that one was the main inspiration for most of the building.
Yeah.
I really like.
So was that one of his like most famous like pieces that you wanted to like bring through, really show off in that facade?
I think it was one of the pieces that most stood out to me and would be most appealing to the public, I suppose, because it's interesting and it's kind of recognizable as a ghost or a little Pac-Man sort of figure. So I felt as though that one would maybe be the most enticing to the public and entice them into the building, even though they can't see the ghost obviously from the outside. But I thought that one had the most opportunity to kind of mold and shape into different things, which was why I took that one and moved forward from there. Yeah, no, you've done really well. Yeah, I think that's like to make that kind of really striking shape to bring through to the facade. It's just like a little nod to his work. It's not like too kind of plagiarising it too much. I think you've done really well there. Thank you.
And as well, that first drawing you did, that site analysis one, was absolutely brilliant. So I'm just going to open the floor. Any other questions for Ailey before we move on? There we go. Yep, got one in the chat. Oh, just the president of GIA saying great project. Well done. Nice. I think we'll just move on to the next one. We're in a bit of a rush to fit everyone in tonight. Next up, we have first years at the art school, Morgan and Katie. If you guys can share your screen.
Hi everyone, I'm Morgan and I study architecture.
Hi, I'm Katie and I study communication design.
So today we're going to be talking a bit about a project called Our Habitat, where we're looking at Govan Hill in the south side of Glasgow. This is part of a new first year experience course in GSA, where first years from across the university are given the opportunity to work with people outside of their own discipline, and we were actually lucky enough to be the first year to experience this new course in its entirety. So in our group, we knew that we wanted our final outcome of whatever we produced to be completely collaborative and representative of all four of our disciplines, which is architecture, communication design, painting and printmaking, and photography, but with an audience unable to tell who worked in which part. We wanted to harmoniously blend our disciplines to produce something that would embody the theme of the project. And I feel like in our group, we achieved what we set out to do. We didn't want to create just one outcome. We wanted to hold a series of events that would allow us to sink our teeth into our research and truly understand the meaning of our habitat.
So we had the area of Govan Hill, which is in the south side of Glasgow. And as you walk into Govan Hill, it's a very different atmosphere from the city centre. So it's much cleaner air, much more fresh fruit markets, and there's the iconic tenement flats, famous to Glasgow's skyline. Immediately, there's a much greater sense of community with colourful shop signs and the greenery of Queen's Park. When we were discussing our findings, we decided it would be beneficial to research the area before coming up with any ideas. When we were there, we found the area to be so colourful, bright and cheerful, but on reflection to statistics, we found that Govan Hill is a deprived area with low employment rates and overcrowding in housing. But there's a lot going on in the centre to improve these statistics and make Govan Hill a place for education and diversity.
So one of the main attractions of Govan Hill is Queen's Park, which provides these really gorgeous views over the city and is home to Queen's Park mosaic mural, which was designed by a local artist named Joanne Dawson, who collaborated with groups of the community and local primary schools in order for her to capture the spirit of the South Side. As there's already an incredible collection of murals throughout Glasgow, we thought it would be exciting to continue Dawson's idea throughout Govan Hill in a similar way. Like Glasgow's current murals, we wanted to create something that would be immediately fun and engaging. We didn't want to create anything too abstract that people may need to analyse to understand. We looked at local designers Rico as they are precise and particular about the placement of their murals. Glasgow's grid system and abundance of listed buildings and conservation areas meant that where we proposed to paint our mural was equally as important as what we painted. We were also influenced by a project called Say Hello to Architecture by Architecture and Design Scotland, which involved learning people's thoughts on where they live, which is vital when entering a new area and proposing to create something there. So we employed the principles of this project while developing our own. We were introduced to a kiosk in Govan Hill by our tutor Isabel Deacon, as she's local to the area, and I thought that this would be a good starting point for us to use, as it is currently a free space for the community to inhabit. Discovering this kiosk really kickstarted our project. We had a place in Govan Hill we could inhabit and therefore start thinking about what we could create there. Lee, the owner of the kiosk, is currently working on a range of street-based projects that will help him put him in touch with locals, hoping to eventually create a committee that will help shape the kiosk's future. The kiosk is part of a bigger project by Lee called the National Architecture Service, which explores the possibilities for architects as a service free at the point of use. The kiosk is an ongoing project. It's still undergoing construction. A fake ceiling was removed at the start of the year, and a new window was put in by a local designer, Simon Harlow, and it was also exhibited in last year's Archifringe. We see the kiosk as a developing monument of Govan Hill. This is a longer, more engaged architectural project where the use of space can be conducted around what the community really needs, and where social, cultural, creative and economic activity in the area can be tested.
So we decided it was important to create work that feels inclusive of the area and gives back. We decided upon a proposed artwork to celebrate the great work happening at the centre, and to do so, we set up a workshop to educate locals in small ways to be more creative. This also gave us an opportunity to socialise with the locals and learn more about the area firsthand. We designed a poster which we put up all over the Govan Hill area and the city centre of Glasgow. We wanted it to be free and for anyone to come along to. At the end of the workshop, we let the locals paint their own tote bags, which they could then take away to reuse within the community. And this highlighted the eco-friendly aspect of the area as well. After the workshop, we thought it would be a great idea to celebrate the mural we'd created based on the area and the success of the workshop. And the whole aim of this project was to create work that could be given back. So we set up an exhibition in the kiosk space, which we then made another poster for and spread it out across social media and printed them again to distribute across the city. The exhibition showed an array of our work from all of us as a group, and we had our mural painted on display inside, including prints which people could buy and take away also. On the night, we had just under 30 people come by and have a look, which was a great success in just a few days turnaround. If we had more time, we wanted to paint the mural on the outside of the kiosk, but due Due to time constraints, this wasn't possible. To conclude, this was a really great project because we were able to create a collection of work that celebrated such a prime area of our city, whilst learning more about how to create work that is socially aware.
Oh, absolutely amazing, guys. Such a great project. Such a great idea by Art School to kind of try run this kind of multidisciplinary team. Like, I think it's such a brilliant idea. I like how, as well, it kind of suits with our surroundings theme tonight. You've reminded me, and I think it should remind everyone of the importance of going out into your surroundings and work that you're working in, and to get to know it better. I think it's a good reminder for professionals and just everyone at university. It's such a great thing to do. So what was it like working in this team at first? I'm guessing you guys probably never worked with such a varied team before.
I really enjoyed it. I know that a lot of people that I spoke to from the architecture course didn't particularly as enjoy. I spoke to quite a few people that didn't enjoy it as much as I did. I had a really nice time not being so militant with my work and having to pin it up on a white wall, and it had to be on white paper and black ink, and especially Katie uses amazing colours, and I think it was really fun just to kind of experiment with that and to kind of let loose a bit in this kind of project. And I found as well that we had some small projects over the summer, and I found myself putting a lot of colour and stuff in just because of how working with different people had rubbed off on me.
Yeah, I think it was really nice because when we started, all four of us knew that we wanted to gain skills from each other whilst also bringing our own skills into it. And I think because all four of us had really good communication throughout the project, it meant we could actually bounce off each other really, really easily. So obviously Morgan coming from architecture has a lot more organised brain, and putting that together in the form of creating events and the workshop, I think we all just bended really well as a team together.
It's nice to hear such a positive story of group work, and the amount of times I've just been the one person trying to organise everything. So it's so good, it gives me hope. Any other questions, guys? Please submit them into that Q&A. Can ask them to the first year team. Another wee thing that I had in my mind was I love the style of drawing. I think that captured that vibrancy and that kind of, even that fruit and veg that you see in the grocers up Victoria Road, that I really got that feeling. I was walking up and down it. Is there any other thoughts of going back and maybe painting that mural or working more with the community, or was that kind of the end of the project, do you guys feel?
I think actually Lee, who has the kiosk, he'd said to us that wall there that we've kind of just photoshopped that onto, he said he'd actually already promised the wall to another kind of local art group. And I think as well, we kind of addressed, we're not local to the area, so we really had to get in there, and we took a lot from Lee, who I think was definitely doing it the right way, as an architect, getting to know the community and seeing what they needed before starting to design there. And I think, as he'd said, he'd promised it to kind of local groups. I think if we kind of stepped in and took over, I think that would be going against what our project was about. But I think theoretically it was really fun for us to kind of experiment with.
Oh, that's such a good point. Yeah, it's actually quite nice. Just you guys have done really well for this little project, but I think it deserves to be that kind of community space, and
we definitely
inform every part.
To be able to do it, because we were wanting to paint the mural as big as we could, but then we realised we literally had a day to do it. So,
always the same.
So we were we'll just do it as big as we can for the time that we've got, and it is definitely something we'd mentioned and we spoke to Lee about. But like he said, he kind of promised it to someone, I think, as well, the people that are going to paint it live round the corner or something, so they'll see it every day. And before this project, I don't think I'd ever been to the kiosk. I'd definitely never been to the kiosk. I don't think I'd been to Gavin Hill before, and I'm not particularly in the south side very much, so I think that's makes sense for them to be able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. And so we're talking about the community a lot. What was the reaction like at the kind of exhibition opening? Did you say you had quite a few people coming in?
Yeah, it was actually fab because it was the most horrible night because it was like January when it was wind and rain and snow and there's no heating in there, so we're all freezing. But there was actually so many people who walked by and just wanted to come in just for a nosy. So obviously it's quite, because it's just off of Victoria Road, there was so many people walking by that it was quite nice that a lot of people didn't know what was going on and came in and found out a wee bit more about the art school and the projects that are on. So it was actually a really, really lovely night.
We also got, I forgot about this, the shutter for the door gets stuck like halfway. So people were walking along and kind of hearing like music and seeing light from this little like half doorway. And they were like, are you open? And they were having to kind of like duck under to come in. But it did really stop people, but it wasn't the best.
It just adds more mystery. I like it.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing, guys. Yeah, I think that's such a great project. I mean, to do that in your first year. I hope you guys like keep working together as well. I think it'll be like your start of a fruitful relationship. So good.
I know, it's definitely nice because we've all kept in touch.
Amazing, guys. Last but not least, we can move on to our final presenter of the night. We have Art School Year 2, Thomas Whiting. Do you want to share your screen, Tom?
Yep, sounds good. We'll be doing a kind of little presentation on my stage 2 kind of semester 1 project, Bo'ness Library, but I kind of want to view it through 2 lenses of conviviality and bricolage. But kind of before we start, I think it's best to define the points a bit more clear. When we're talking about kind of conviviality, we're looking at Ivan Illich's book Tools for Conviviality. The key words really here, we're looking at autonomous and creative intercourse among persons, and we're also looking at something that's in contrast with the conditioned response of persons to the demand of the environment kind of made upon them. And then when we're looking at the lens of bricolage, we're having a look at Collage City, the book by Fred Cotter and Colin Rowe. And they kind of very succinctly define what the bricklayer does here, that he connects the past, the uses, behaviours and ideas embedded in the material, physical presence of existing buildings, and he connects that to the future by creating through additions, subtractions, erasures and modifications to create a new whole. And then how these relate to the library. So for those of you that don't know what a library is, you go there and get books and it's free. So this kind of idea is what Ivan Illich suggests as a convivial tool. So it's not kind of framed under producer-consumer relationships that are most common, certainly in our society, and that it's kind of open to all as a result. So with those kind of 3 foundation points bearing in mind, and the kind of 2 lenses that we can look through of conviviality and the bricklayer, we'll have a little look at Bo'ness. So this here is the kind of coastline where Bo'ness sits on the east coast of Scotland. It used to be a very prosperous shipping town and also a mining town, and then like everything with the deindustrialization, Margaret Thatcher, etc., it's kind of no more. You have the death of the high street and all of those kind of other negative kind of aspects that are usually attributed to kind of post-industrial towns. And then we can also see the library here, which sort of sits on the outskirts, kind of facing the sea, but also kind of ringed in by the ring road that runs by the coast. When we kind of look at Bo'ness, it being formerly a very prosperous town, like most other prosperous kind of industrial towns, it has a really rich cultural heritage, and it actually has something that is kind of deeply convivial about it, and also goes back hundreds of years, really. These 2 images are from the Bo'ness Fair. It's a kind of week-long get together when everyone comes out onto the streets and they have parades, music, marching bands. And it's a kind of coming together of the people when they build sets and props and floats, etc. So it really is a sort of kind of true essence of a convivial space. And it got me thinking that when usually the street isn't maybe necessarily the first idea of a convivial space, but in the context of Bo'ness and to respond to that, it might be a good idea to take that idea and kind of transplant it into the building, which you see on this slide here. On the left is the existing kind of Bo'ness library. So it's 3 buildings, a tavern in the top right-hand corner from the 15th century, a tobacco warehouse, which is that rectangle in the bottom left. Again, that's quite old, I think about 17th century. And then you've got a kind of 80s extension, which links the two rather oddly and doesn't really give any sort of direction. So the idea on the right-hand side of this diagram, you can see this kind of blue strip being the internal street. I don't know if anyone's been to Dunfermline Library by Richard Murphy Architects. It's a very similar sort of experience. You can stand on the street and you know what's on your left and what's on your right, much like a normal, outdoor street in the city. And then having a bit of a closer look at that here, which doesn't look to be in the best quality, but will persevere. You can see how the kind of paving wraps around the side of the building and then comes in and forms this kind of arm of the street that extends. And then you also get a better idea of kind of function as well from the plan. In this kind of middle section, there's a kind of convivial space, but can be reconfigured for lectures or talks, as well as like activity sessions. And I suppose that kind of brings us on to the program, and what really makes a kind of library or any building sort of convivial is ultimately what the people can do with it. So defined here sort of 3 tools for conviviality. The first one, the kind of hammer and screwdriver, that is the idea of a kind of making and doing space. So when Illich talks about the kind of autonomous production, it means that a person could, I don't know, make zines if they wanted to, or produce a piece of furniture for themselves, and it's not someone telling them to do that. The middle one is a stack of books, because as we know, typically a library would have books in it, and that is for the kind of dissemination of information freely. And then the one on the right is sort of to bring it up more to date with the 21st century. You have the computer which can connect people, number one. So it's a kind of great geographical leveler. And also you can produce digitally as well and take information digitally. But then how these kind of manifest themselves spatially. On the left here, we have the make/do space. This is in old kind of merchant's house that was abandoned and disused. So the kind of street pierced the library and extended to connect the merchant's house with the rest of the buildings. And then in the middle here, we have the entranceway into the tavern, which has been converted into the reading rooms. And then on the right-hand side, we have a picture of the kind of top-lit computer suites at the very top of the tavern as well. And then to get an idea of how that fits in with the actual overall scheme, on the right-hand side, we can see the make-do spaces kind of at the end of the street, and we can follow that along then to the very extreme left-hand side, and we can see the tavern with the kind of reading room on the 2 bottom floors and the computer space on the top. So that's kind of how we can view the project through the lens of conviviality. And then if we have a look at kind of bricolage, I'll start with Richard Serra's action verbs, which really I felt it was kind of important to decide what your architectural move was, especially when you've got a building that's actually sort of 3 buildings, a tavern, old tobacco warehouse, and a kind of 80s extension, which slots the 2 together, and then potentially a 4th one with the old disused merchant's house. It was important to have a kind of architectural language so that kind of binded these together, gave it a new identity, but without sort of dismissing the heritage that comes with a listed tavern and the heritage of the kind of tobacco warehouse and the port, for example, and the merchant's house. And also, even though the 80s extension was kind of concrete and a bit ugly, it was still a kind of important part of the history of Bo'ness. So the three kind of action verbs that I came up with was to preserve. So that was the kind of most sustainable thing to do, kind of should be done at any, any point that you can. To extrude. So this was in order to accommodate ultimately more space for a kind of growing program of needs for the library of the 21st century. And then the other one was to subtract. So this was an idea to kind of open up spaces and where they were very cramped before. And we can kind of see that best. Again, I think these images are a little blurry maybe for me. I don't know if they are for you. You can see subtract best happening on the right-hand side where there's a sort of the facade wall has been peeled away. And instead, we have a kind of large atrium and skylight that goes through. Before, this was very low ceiling, kind of tight and quite mean 80s architecture. And then on the left, you can really see preserve happening with the facade of the tavern, and also with the kind of grey square, which was the concrete of the 80s part. And then you see the black kind of burnt timber extrusion kind of popping up through it. And again, in section, gives you a bit of a better idea, perhaps a better quality as well. We can see the elevator shaft on the far right that links all the floors of the tavern, as well as the subtractions which have happened to let light in over the convivial space for the talks and the lectures. And again, the subtractions over the make and do space to, again, let natural light in for work. I hope that's quite a kind of quick whistle-stop tour throughout the project, and it doesn't show all the project images as well. So if you have any other ones, you can go to the website at the bottom. But I would kind of like to leave it on one final note and suggest that there's a kind of new way, or not necessarily a new way, but a maybe underappreciated way that is kind of championed in the book Collage City. And that by applying the eye of the bricklayer, we can see what is already of value. We do not need to tear down to create a utopia. We can weave together the old, the not so old, the new, and that which is still to be built to create our own pocket utopias, whether that be at building scale, town scale, or city scale. So thank you.
Oh, that's so good, Thomas. Such a good project. Even better that I just read that book, Collage City, like last year. So that was pure amazing seeing that, getting like that theory getting put into a project. Done that like amazingly. Last chance to get in the Q&A, guys. The last project of the night. If anyone wants to shoot a question to Thomas, if not, I can get started. I'm going to geek out about Colin Rowe, maybe.
I'm not that well versed. It was a year ago.
No worries, no worries. So the book is absolutely amazing, guys. Any first years listening, get onto it. I think that theory it's quite hard to get into, but that theory can apply so well to kind of future projects. Definitely get that in the library. But the book kind of bases its theories a lot in Rome. What was it like applying that to Bo'ness? Different context.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of, the first thing you're taught is context, certainly at the art school. And I think from that you sort of, and when you're working on a project, you're always reading, something and thinking, oh, there's this theory, and how do you apply that, to your own work. So I think, initially the cogs start going as soon as you read something. You're always wondering at the back of your mind, like, how does this work? Or, could you apply it to Bo'ness or something? Or maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm really sad. But, so from that point of view, it didn't seem like a kind of big jump. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't doing it right, but it kind of seemed a little easier than I thought, and kind of to extrapolate the kind of principle and apply it.
No, I think you've done it like amazingly, done it really well. I think the site especially really shows off this theory like so well, and the way you've preserved it all, of keeping that tavern, the merchant's house as well. I think that really was a really good choice of using that theory to this project. And also, I think that I really like the way I tried to organise the night. I think having you right after the community mural group, I thought works quite well, just because of having that collage aesthetically, but then bringing in this collage of like surroundings and urban history. Yeah, I thought you guys were done really well. But see, if you can go back to your section, sorry.
Yeah, of course. 2 seconds.
So with the community group, I know they went for kind of all colour to really kind of show off and bring like attention to their artwork. But with your section, are you working mostly just with like original finishes? What did you think of, like, for material wise, for these different spaces?
I mean, I should have kind of added a picture of what it was like originally. It was like being inside a womb or something. It's kind of like very, very cramped, and I think red walls. And in terms of the kind of internal finishes, there was a lot of kind of looking at, you know, how you could locally source timber, and the majority of it being kind of like the SIP panel sort of construction, if there was any extra insulation kind of required internally. So I think at the moment it was kind of a timber finish, and something sort of, you don't want to, you know, you don't want to feel like you're in a womb when you're in a building, and you don't want to feel like the kind of space is sort of limiting or oppressive. So it's kind of light as possible, so that, you know, the community and the participants and the activity can sort of be center stage.
Oh, nice one. No, that was, yeah, a really great project. I'm just wary of the time. I think that's us just about coming to the end of tonight. So I just want to say thanks a lot to everyone that's presented tonight. I thought you guys have been really amazing and really finished off the series like so strongly. Want to say thanks again to Doors Open Day for helping organise. And yeah, we'll be back next year, hopefully with a more social event, back with like pizza and drinks. So hopefully see you next year, guys.
Sorry, Massimo, can I just very quickly throw in as well, just a massive thank you first of all to all the people that have presented tonight and over the past 2 nights as well, but also just a massive thank you to yourself and also to Glasgow Doors Open Day for doing all the organising and for facilitating the events in the past 3 days. I think it's been a really, really interesting series of presentations, really, really insightful, just really enjoyable to see the quality of the work that's getting produced by the students. And I think you should all be really, really proud of yourselves. I think it's just absolutely fantastic. So thanks a lot for presenting, and thank you very much, Massimo, for doing all the organising.
Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, and yeah, we'll see you next year.
Right. Cheers.